Yeah, there is an option, but to have a really informed discussion. In terms of any unsolicited proposal, there's not a consensus on the council to fully entertain an unsolicited proposal because it's very, let's just say that. And we're also going to have a very transparent process where no one's going to have a chance to cut the line, so to speak. And, I still get calls about the Altenheim property from real estate interests. When you look at what happened in this most recent legislative session, the governor had this proposal called the Build Up Illinois Plan. And the Build Up Illinois Plan had a large component having to do with development near what they considered to be transit nodes. A lot of Forest Park is within that sphere because we have the CTA end here at both the Green Line and the Blue Line, as well as a number of bus terminals in Forest Park. So much of Forest Park is going to be at the transit node. And to the real estate development world, developer world, they're very aware that there's a plot of green land in Forest Park. They're aware of the Altenheim property. And so when the village, has its discussions with the Altenheim board and arranges, some kind of buyback proposal, and when the council gets willing to take, very concrete steps, I think that there'll be a number of qualified parties interested in that property. I just want to say a couple of words real quick. I appreciate staff putting together their list of challenging expenses that we have over the next few years. We know our costs are going up. We devoted this meeting to discuss revenue sources. And since the last meeting, I've talked to a number of restaurant owners about the proposed places of eating tax. Some are here today. We see that there's continued uncertainties in the market, right? There's new exchange of fire in the Gulf right now. And I know that's driving up costs. I listened to the news this morning. Oil's back above $75 a barrel. That's going to translate into more expensive gas. That's going to translate into rising food costs for our small business owners. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And I think we all are. So what I'm going to suggest is that we continue to look at how to implement the places of eating tax, but that we defer any concrete decisions on exactly when to enact and when to impose that tax. Working with our small business community, I see the Chamber of Commerce is here today, but we want to keep the restaurant owners apprised of our challenges. We've had very candid discussions with them because they're the ones that are going to be getting hit. Chain restaurants, they can withstand the lot more than the small businesses. McDonald's, Chipotle, Portillo's, they're going to be just fine. I still have not talked to Harvest 360, but I've talked to some of the smaller restaurants on Madison Street. Some of the newer restaurants in town, we're not even aware that the village is considering this. So, we heard one person say that the margins are pretty tight for restaurant profitability. But to have a new restaurant who are, looking at Forest Park and not knowing what the council is lining up, that could be devastating. So, let's keep in mind their challenges. Yeah, we can. Recently, I'm shifting to a different topic. I was asked to have a Zoom call with a law firm out of state. There's a national settlement between chemical makers and municipalities for liability associated with PFAS chemicals, forever chemicals. And so Forest Park is the asked to join a class and likely participate in a large settlement having to do with PFAS chemicals. Commissioner Belden went over and participated in Zoom. This was last Friday. We don't know exactly what it's going to mean. We're going to have our water testing. We're presumed to be eligible under this pot of money just because of the prevalence of PFAS chemicals in the community and because of what's publicly known about forest parks infrastructure. But because we're discussing new sources of revenue, I wanted to put this on everyone's sort of list as a potential revenue source. When I asked the question, actually I did not ask the question. The attorney from the firm who's in charge of this, he wants to solicit our participation. And he gave us the number. The number sounds a little bit unrealistic, so I'm not even going to say it right now. But what I will say is that this potential, settlement tool would go towards things like water infrastructure, including fire trucks and apparatus that may have been contaminated by PFAS chemicals. So let's continue to monitor that. And, we've talked about short-term rentals. I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and pursue the revenue that can be through regulation of short-term rentals. The village will be coming out with some proposals very soon. We're talking to our law firm about this, but we want to look at how we can improve revenue from short-term rentals. There's varying estimates of the actual number of short-term rentals in Forest Park, but if we can see some revenue from it, then I suggest we.
But not to the general fund, right? That just has to go for tourism.
It'll defray costs that otherwise could be paid for by the general fund. Yes, there are restrictions.
It's not going to be helping our.
I think it would certainly help the village because it'll take pressure off the general fund.
That's it would be money that we would be giving to the chamber, but the money has to go directly to money.
I'm winding down, and then you can. So I'm going to ask that we look at pursuing short-term rentals. I'll stop there.
All right, look. This is the budget, right, that we all have. And if we look at the very last line on here, right, we're looking at our ending fund balances since 2023, okay? 2023 was okay, $1.4 million ending fund balance, right? 2024 was okay. And then it starts, getting worse and worse and worse. So that, in 2025, we had a, $252,000 our ending fund balance, but that's only because we carried over a balance from the year before that, okay? Ending fund balance 2026, if, we look at everything with carryover, we're at 1.6 million, and we're looking at fiscal year 2027 with $5.6 million. That's where we're ending the year in the general fund. And so far, we've talked about no ways to really, and we have $400,000 for the community center in grants that we can bring in. The short-term rentals we've talked about are not going to go directly to the general fund. That's money that can be used only for, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's only going to be used for tourism and conventions and stuff like that, which yes, will in a trickle-down way help the general fund, but it's not directly coming to offset anything that we have going on here. So far we haven't talked about anything except the not video gaming, I'm sorry, except the places of meeting tax that could actually bring in money at $1 million a year, which would be a significant amount that we can talk about. And it boggles my mind, Mayor, that, you know, you're talking about a lawsuit that maybe will get money for possibly if we win that lawsuit. But that's a complete unknown when we have a known and real source of income. Probably the biggest and only real thing we can act on now, sitting right here, and nobody wants to support it. I find that highly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that nobody wants to.
Sorry.
You were just we're in a tough spot, and I agree, and I think for all the reasons that our mayor gave are valid. The one thing that I land on, and it's not popular, it's not gonna be popular, I'm sure, certainly with our business owners, some of which I know very well. But the business owners have an opportunity to make a decision to either have it hit, pass it through, and it becomes a tax on a receipt for the patrons, right? That's what it ends up becoming. So, I mean, I do hear and understand the rising costs and this and that, and we don't want to burden the small businesses. Really, the burden lies on the patrons. And so the concern is, you know, well, I'm not going to spend it. So, and it seems to me, if we, like we discussed last time, a graduated approach to this would be responsible, albeit not very popular. But sitting out there, you understand, hopefully, you know, I apologize, I was a little bit late, but you have a good breadth and understanding, and some of you guys have been here twice to these budgets, some years past. We're in a tough spot. And Maria is not wrong. I mean, there's an opportunity for sustainable significant revenue, not a one-time shot in the arm. And I think that's important for us to understand this community. And you know, it's not just the residents of Forest Park; it's also the folks that are coming to visit Forest Park. And you know, everyone's financial portfolio is different. But you know, I mean, $1 on 100, $1.50 on 100 is not going to steer me away from ordering a burger and a beer at 1.5%. So. And again, I don't want that to sound arrogant or condescending. I just think it's real. I think it's real. And I don't know, in the grand scheme of all of the businesses, really, when you look at that number and you pass it through, is the impact as big as we're saying? Now, I'm not the business owner, of course, but when I look at it in simple terms like that, and then I look at what the situation is in the village, I have to side with the village from like I said, a sustainable source of significant revenue that directly would impact the general fund. And I think we have to be real careful. I think cautious, careful, and understanding, right? You know, and I missed public comment. I heard it last time, and so I think I know the position of most of the businesses, generally speaking. But in terms of the word transparency, that's my position. And I believe it is, you know, we're tasked with making tough decisions to move the village of Forest Park forward. I think this one is, you know, it's probably going to be ill received, but in the essence of moving the village of Forest Park forward is the right thing to do.
I just want to say, I didn't say that I'm really against the place of the tax. What I'm saying is, I think we should continue the discussion. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and that we just need to be aware of that. So I'm not saying implement today, but I'm asking staff to continue to do the work that would have to go with it, so that if we get to that point, we can, you know, flip the proverbial switch. Also, I'd like to see us look at a streaming and amusement tax. Riverside just implemented this. You know, the estimates for what it's going to mean to them are not yet known, but I'm told that it's something that we can implement here. So I'm going to suggest that, you know, staff look into that a little bit more as well and kind of come up with estimates for that. And I will also say in terms of new revenue ideas, I've lived in this community for not quite 30 years, almost 30 years. And I've always appreciated the village's ability to remove snow after storms at night. But given where we are now in terms of our fiscal reality, I think it's about time that we have a serious look at overnight parking and maybe some permits to allow for overnight. So maybe we can get some estimates for what that would mean to the village as well. As the council prepares to make some tough decisions. But it's clear that we're gonna have to make some tough decisions. But we want to do it in a partnership. So with our business community. With respect to the residents here, and we'll continue to do this in a very public manner with debate and back and forth among council members. But that's where I am at the moment in terms of new revenue ideas.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Yeah, so I wanted to mention the short-term rental cost recovery and regulation. I'm a big proponent of that. The lodging tax, streaming tax is on my list as well. Parking, the Traffic and Safety Commission has recommended residents be able to purchase passes for on-street parking, overnight parking. This is becoming more and more of a common practice in many West Berman municipalities and has been requested by Forest Park residents. Also recommending to align Forest Park Business District parking meters along the lines of what you were saying with dining and bar opening and closing times, because I myself have been ticketed for parking past 8 o'clock. And we want to make sure that people who are visiting and enjoying our businesses don't have to worry about getting a ticket or having problems with paying for parking or worrying about parking after hours. And then looking at parking fees around town to just align with other area municipalities, not going crazy, but making sure that if you're in Oak Park or the Forest and you're in Forest Park, that we're not discouraging people, but that it's similar, so that we're bringing in revenue, but we're not and we're also saying come stay enjoy. The projected revenue that I'm looking at for grants is more like $600,000 or $700,000 a year. And in terms of place of meeting tax, it is not my favorite source of revenue. The research that I have done with many economic projections in terms of what's happening in our state, what's happening with small businesses and restaurants. What it's showing is that since we have been in office in 2022, the margins for small businesses, the expenses with gas, agriculture, cost of food, transportation, and then the projections for the next 2 or 3 years is going to be the same. But many small businesses are relying on credit. And it's not the argument that it's 50 cents or $1 passed on to a consumer is not exactly what we're talking about, because in the last 3 or 4 years, 2 or 3 years, businesses have already passed on costs to customers. So it's, you know, $5 and then we're passing on $1 more. So we're asking our small businesses to, it's an added weight onto another thing that they're already doing to survive. And the margins for many small businesses that we have in Forest Park, and to the mayor's point, we have many types of restaurants in Forest Park. We have chains, we have small individual businesses, and the impact on them are different. I weigh that as being, you know, is this the last straw? With the need to obtain revenue for the village and the importance of the revenue for the village. And it is, it's a very difficult choice. I know what we have to do, but I also know the value of our small businesses in our community, and the fact that sales tax revenue, and the fact that our small businesses do a lot for us. I do not think that waiting is going to help, because the economic environment that we're in is not going to get much better. I would like input from the community to see if that's the case, but I find this to be, based on what I'm reading, finding this to be an absolutely agonizing choice to make, because margins are very small. So this is not it's a very difficult choice for me to make. I also want to say for the record that when we had the Altenheim meeting in August, I was on record as wanting everyone to come in through the front door through an open RFP process. And I also want to say that the work that we do to go to Springfield to advocate for revenue and funds to come back to Forest Park that are captured by the state and returned to us through property taxes and through income tax is a significant source of revenue, and that when we go to Springfield to get that money back is a significant source of revenue, and that when we go to Springfield to get it back, it makes a tremendous difference. So we cannot overlook that when we go to Springfield and advocate for the resources that our village needs.
Well, that comes down the line here. So I hear things like, you know, pro-business and small margins and supporting our businesses, and those are great things. The things that affect the business here, let me read you some. This is a business license invoice that representative of a bar restaurant. It's an amusement device license, $900. Food service inspection, $250. A jukebox license, a liquor license, liquor patio license, restaurant catering license, non-illuminated signs license, sidewalk use application, sidewalk outdoor cafe use permit, sidewalk use license. Some total of around $5,000 or so for a business, for licenses. That affects the businesses. Now, I'm not suggesting that we just say we're not doing that anymore. That would be irresponsible. But I'm saying there might be a balance. Giving something back to the businesses would be like perhaps taking a look at those fees and adjusting those fees, which directly impacts the pocketbook of the business owner in lieu of the places of meeting tax, right? So the places of meeting tax affects the patrons, like I explained before, and the licenses and fees affects the business owner. So it might be a little bit of a yin and a yang if we did the math on that to figure out what services or licenses perhaps we could loosen up on and still come out ahead with the places of meeting tax. I heard in the last meeting, it was brought up that, giving time back to the business owners that was taken away during some troubling times in Forest Park. I think we're past that. I don't know what a big deal that means to some of the business owners or how that impacts your business, but getting a couple hours back at the end of the day or on the weekend or during the week, an hour or so, perhaps could help to stimulate some new business, what do we call it, industry business, right, on Sunday nights where people come out that are working in that. I was in the restaurant business for many, many years, and having a place to go at the end of the evening after my shift was over, was something nice. And we don't have that in Forest Park really, because we closed a little early. So there's a couple of things there that are pro-business, help the business, directly impact the pocketbooks of the business owners, versus what we're talking about with the places of eating. So it's just something to consider, because we're currently doing the one. And, and we're saying we're pro-business and we understand that they have small margins, but, we have a considerable fee schedule that impacts all of those businesses. Okay. Last time.
Comments, yeah.
So, I just, about the places of meeting tax, I've talked about this a lot on record in the newspaper, you can look it up. I don't want to do it because I hate businesses. I just want to remind you guys that I was not one of the people that wanted to get rid of video gaming. In fact, if there was a way forward to bring it back, I would do that. So I am not an anti-business person. I'm pro-business, and this is not because I want to do something horrible to you guys or hurt your businesses. I hear what you're saying. But it's impossible for me as someone who is elected to run this village to look at this huge amount of money that we're going to have as a deficit in our general fund, to at the last budget meeting have listened to our village administrator and our finance director say they support the places of meeting tax, to have heard from our first responders, and our fire chief didn't speak at that meeting, but in her report, which I have here, talks about how we need more resources to do the things that need to get done in the fire department, and to hear our first responders say, we don't feel safe doing our jobs because there aren't enough resources for us to be doing them safely and properly. I cannot hear those things and look at the single source of immediate revenue that we have and say, no, let's not do it. I don't feel like we have a choice not to do it. We talk about these other things that we can do, maybe doing a vote to increase our property taxes over PTEL to fund the pensions, which we've talked about before. We can use that money for other things too, right? But that's a big ask to do that. And it's not something I'm against, but it isn't something that can happen right away. We talk about the grants, that's great. I hope we can get those grants. I hope they come in. We talk about the streaming service, but none of us have any idea how much money that's going to bring in. Could be, $10,000, could be $100,000, but it's not going to be $1 million. I'm fairly certain. So we do this every single budget meeting as we talk about all these, well, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do this, this might work, maybe this will bring in some money. The fact of the matter is none of those things ever really pan out to bring us any real money. And we are in a very serious financial situation right now. And I am, I guess, appealing to you guys again to direct the staff to move forward on this, because we don't have anything else right now that's going to make a difference from us financially.
Commissioners, has everyone had their say?
Okay, so to kind of go along with what I just said, one of the things that, also, I think it's been a little bit of a frustration for me with the budget meetings, but I brought this up with, Rachel and Tish, and I'm hoping we can move forward with it this year. Is to put together, not like it doesn't have to be real difficult, kind of just like a basic project management, document that shows, here's the things that we're looking at in terms of financial projects. And here's the milestones we hope to accomplish. Here's the people working on them. Here's, an update, maybe every month or whatever we decide when we're going to update it. And it would just be a way to keep better track of what we're working on, so we could all be accountable and have that in one place instead of having to, constantly ask for updates. So it might say, place of the meeting, on the table for now. Maybe bring it up again at this date, maybe it would have streaming tax, who's in charge of, researching that, when is the next update gonna be, milestones, things like that. So I'm hoping that that's something that can get implemented really soon, because I think that would be a really great way to communicate and keep track of these issues. And the other thing that I want to talk about is, I know we have appropriations coming up, and I have also asked that we can have a meeting that focuses on expenses, because we haven't done that. And I think, Rachel's right that a huge percentage of what we spend money on is salaries. So I'm not suggesting that, we cut salaries, but I am suggesting that we really need to sit down and look at all the things we're spending money on, and have a public meeting to talk about that. Because I think when we're in this critical of a situation, for us to not do that publicly and then still, pass appropriations to say, here's how much we're gonna spend this year is financially irresponsible. So I'm hoping we can find a way to fit that in either at the July 22nd meeting or tagged on to one of our other council meetings. But I think we have to have a public discussion where we go over expenses. And for the record, I would have liked to have another idea about revenue, because I just don't think when we're in this situation that having, 3 meetings, 2 hours each is enough for us to really tackle these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this has been a very robust discussion today. I know I've learned a lot, and I appreciate being here and sharing our ideas. I want to commend everyone's participation, and I just want to highlight our department directors and our staff. I know I always, when I come to our council meetings and I look at what our regular activity and the work that we do, I see how carefully and seriously they take managing our resources on a regular basis. And especially Director Olmstead and Administrator Entler, that this is a challenging environment, and that we're all working very hard to say, how do we make good decisions? And as someone myself who has, I work in an environment at a university where I have had more than a decade managing public finances, including federal and state grant funding, and cost reimbursable grants and contracts, and all these moving pieces. It's not easy, and making these challenging decisions, and it's hard. But I want to just highlight a couple things. What we do when we put together a budget, it's a plan, it's a management document, it's a snapshot in time of how we manage our finances and where money is in which account, when the budget is finalized. And, you know, as a council, we manage the budget throughout the year with our staff to spend responsibly and adjust it. And we can adjust it to respond to new circumstances, you know, but we're going to be legally required to adopt it, you know, at the end of July. But we're gonna, you know, do everything we can to make these good decisions, not only in making a budget, but throughout the year. But, you know, our staff does a great job and department directors do a great job in putting that together and managing our resources. But yeah, we have big decisions to make. And, you know, I just appreciate the work that gets done. The information that I talked about the places of eating tax is, you know, it's a hard decision. It's not a decision I'm unwilling to make. But I do want to say that given the environment that we're in, I don't think it's $1 million revenue source. Because of the pressures that we're facing, the pressures that businesses are facing. I don't think we're going to get $1 million from the places of eating tax. I think we'll be realistic about that. I think we want to, when we think about revenue sources for the village, I think we want to look at, and when we look at a budget and when we prioritize the activities that we want to work on, we want to focus on the cash flow needs of the village, unrestricted revenue, proposals that will be successful and generate the most revenue in this unstable climate. And, you know, I think Commissioner Maxam has been very good at highlighting the fact that, you know, we need to look at lots of different ideas. But we want to look at ideas that are likely to be successful and that have been well researched and have lots of good data behind them and are supported by evidence and are going to help support the staff and the residents that we serve. And that, you know, we're going to continue to work together as a village council and staff to achieve the best possible aims. And that we'll communicate honestly and transparently to achieve the best possible aims working together. So I just think it's important to say, you know, there's no perfect idea, but we have to look at current information when we talk about which aims are which ideas are going to be the most successful, and ultimately we're going to have to prioritize which aims go first or second based on the availability of staff to pursue them, because we have to keep the village running at the same time. But I want to thank our staff and our directors for the job they do every day in keeping things moving forward while we struggle with these big questions. I appreciate them very much. Thank you.
Okay. I going to talk really loud. I think batteries died on this. Is it on? Okay. All right, so I'm going to kind of just go through and recap this, and what we've talked about so far. It's so that staff knows what we're moving forward with. So places of eating tax, staff will continue to work on documents and also assist in helping to educate business owners as to you know, the places of eating tax. I know in conversation that I had with the chamber, one of the requests that came from them was that if the village council was to move forward with the places of eating tax, that staff hold a meeting with the businesses to discuss kind of the process by which places of eating tax would be collected from the village and what would be expected from the businesses. So we will continue to work on that. Any questions about we touched upon the streaming amusement tax. So just to kind of talk real quickly about that. Currently the village has in their ordinances a video rental amusement tax. We had zero income last year. The year before that, I think we had $18, and I think that might have been because there was a red box somewhere in town. That was a 7% increase or 7% tax when we had Blockbuster and Video Gallery and people actually went to a store and rented a video. So that revenue is zero now going forward. Again, streaming is kind of where we're at with that. So, you're looking at streaming services like YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, Prime. It is a tax that IML is even going to be doing a session on at their conference in September. They've provided a model ordinance. It's typically based on the billing address. And so luckily for Forest Park, we only have one zip code because that's typically what they go through. Hearing no objections, I'll continue to do the research on that as additional source of revenue for the village. Short-term rentals, I think we're all in agreement the regulation is the way to go. As I stated before, this isn't really a revenue generating portion for the regulation, but the fees that we charge for that will, it'll allow us a couple things. It'll cover the costs that staff has to put into registration and any inspections. It'll give us business owners' names. And I know some of the issues that we've had this in the past when we've had calls for complaints is trying to figure out who actually owns property. So this would have business or the short-term rental owners register, so we would know who to get in touch with. And then we'll continue to put together information on a hotel tax, even though as Commissioner Maxim correctly stated, it would not affect the general fund. There is a restricted use of it, but I think it's something to consider in the sense that, Commissioner Nero talked about what can we do to give back to the businesses. We could use the hotel tax to, there's a couple different possibilities as far as, marketing the village as someplace to come and stay overnight. We can use it on certain festivals. I don't want to say every festival that we hold would be, you'd be able to use that funding because I think it typically aims towards getting people to stay overnight in Forest Park. But I think along those lines as to what he said, that that would be something where we could give back to the business community to get people to come into their businesses and their restaurants. So staff will continue working on that. We'll continue working on, there's been some talk with traffic and safety about overnight parking passes and street parking. I think that's on their agenda for an upcoming meeting that we've been talking about processes with regard to that as well, and possibly increasing the number of times that we can allow on-street parking overnight. There's been conversation. We'll do some research into what kind of revenue can be increased as far as meter parking. Do we want to increase hours of parking, and then do we want to look at increasing the dollar amount for that as well? So we'll bring forth some information with regards to that. As far as the working document that Commissioner Maxim talked about, part of this meeting is going to help shape that. I want to make it clear that there is a lot in front of us and there is little staff to do a lot of work. And so I'd like to take all of this and sit down with staff and put together a timeline. This is not something that I can have all ready for the July 22nd meeting. It's not something I can have all ready in August. And so I'm going to have to work with staff to spread it out so that, our other duties, we have our audit coming up. We're working on a water rate study right now, which, Sal, Tish, and I have a lot of work to do on getting our consultant information on that, while also simultaneously working on, the Altenheim project. And so I promise you the work will get done, but we're just going to need some time to be able to put together when we can really kind of focus on this stuff. Couple other things to note, you know, we're sitting here today, we're talking about revenue. And I want the community to know that we are supporting our community, our business community, our residential community in other ways as well. Economic development, you know, one of the things that we're going to be talking about when we talk about expenses is, you know, when do we want to implement a strategic plan? That will help staff plan. You know, it's my understanding and talking to fellow colleagues and our consultants that the village really needs to focus on a strategic plan that talks about kind of the big picture items, and then we can go into a comprehensive plan that will address how we actually get there. And so that will be something that not necessarily in this fiscal year, given the fact that we do have some financial challenges, but something that we can hopefully plan for in fiscal year 2028. You will see in the budget when you get the special funds revenue, I am going to propose using our TIF funds to hire an economic development consultant. We are well funded in our TIFs. It's a valid use of that money, and I think it would be a great place. We have 2 TIFs at the moment. Working on that third one, and I think it would be a great investment in addition to, you know, working with our planner to have somebody come in and help us in recruiting the businesses to the village. You know, and we have a limited amount of time to use that funding, so I think it would be a good use of those funds to have somebody who has that knowledge and has those connections to the businesses to be able to help us, particularly in the 2 areas that we can concentrate on. Fortunately, I can't speak about too many details, but hopefully in the next 30 to 60 days, you will see these ideas come back publicly. But we have at least 5 right now. Director Blinky and I are working on 5 potential developments. Some of them are sales tax generating. Some of them are property tax generating. Some of them are just good for the community in that they will bring people here and they will kind of put us on the map. So I'm really, really excited about that. The other thing that you'll see proposed in the budget, again in the TIF, is facade grants. We certainly want to help our businesses here as well. And so if businesses are in a TIF and the council approves, I've made a proposal to provide some assistance for businesses to improve their facades. Because we certainly don't want to be investing money into new businesses and then leaving our small businesses that are here behind. And we've put some thought into, you know, the amount that we would be willing to assist them with. And so that it's meaningful in its purpose. Parking lot opportunities. I think one of the things that we can do is figure out a way to assess the parking lots that we have. You know, what I keep hearing is that there is a need in some places, and then we have other parking lots that sit empty. And so, you know, I can work with our police department and, you know, try to figure out where we have parking opportunities. One of the places that doesn't get a lot of use, and so, you know, we had an opportunity to team up with Curry Motors in the past, has been our CTA parking lot. And so they pay us a monthly lease. And so, you know, money that we weren't collecting a year ago, we are now collecting a monthly lease from them. And I think there are more opportunities for that, or at least we should look into whether or not there are more opportunities for that. I know that we have a potential partner for the Van Buren parking lot, and so that is something that we may see forthcoming as well. You know, the biggest thing is this well-rounded approach to this. Not one of these in and of itself is going to solve our financial issues. But collectively, I think that they can make a difference in where we're going with this. And then I have this down here. I was asked to bring this up. you know, we talk a lot about our hands being tied because we are non-home rule. And so, again, you know, this is on here for discussion as far as whether or not this is something that the village wants to consider in the future. It would take some time to put together. I don't know that I have an opinion either way. I'm kind of in the position that I'm in. I'm not necessarily sure I'm allowed to have one. But it has been brought up in conversations, and so you know, was on the list of things to put out here for at least just start a discussion on it. And so you know, just to make sure that I've covered everything that I put down. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. So before I pass it off to Commissioner Maxim, does anybody have any comments, questions on, you know, the direction staff is being given to move forward?
So for home rule, what we had talked about, I think in a meeting with you, Tish and Rachel, was whether that had to be done, if there was a group out there that was willing to push for home rule. If that had to be done via signatures that were submitted, or if the council itself could put together an ordinance to get it on the ballot as a referendum item. And I think, Rachel, you said that both were possibilities that the council could proceed with that. So I would like to raise that as something I would like us as a council to do, to put it on the ballot so that residents can vote on it. Doesn't necessarily mean you're in favor of it or not. It just means we're saying, hey, let's put this on the table for people to vote on. So I would love to hear what other council people feel about that.
I'm fine with that.
I think home rule is something that many residents don't understand. I think it's more advantageous if it's a citizen-led effort. If we were to have an ordinance to put it on the ballot, that's a strategic decision that you know, that would require a different level of engagement. I would be supportive of an ordinance that would put it on the ballot, but I think that recognizes a level of engagement of citizens would be necessary. So, but the choice is important.
So I will say this, that there is a timing of putting a question on the ballot, and so I can put that information together. It would not necessarily, first we'd have to determine which election you would want a referendum question put on the ballot for, and then there's a time frame you have to count back, you know. I'm not quite exactly sure what the numbers are, but it's something like 78 or 98 days. And so there would be time built into educating the community. I will say, from the village's perspective, the only thing that staff can do is provide factual information. We cannot allocate financial resources to any type of campaign. And so, you know, I think that the general idea would be to get consensus on whether or not home rule should be considered. And then from there, it could move to whether or not the home rule referendum question would be put on a ballot by a resolution passed by the council, or a citizen-led petition. And again, I can kind of do the numbers too on, you know, how many signatures are needed. So that's some basic information I can get to the rest of the council in regards to that. But the campaign would have to be a citizen-led campaign. And so there would need to be, you know, a viable group of people to take on that challenge. And they would also be responsible for any fundraising that would need to be done in order to pay for this type of referendum. I can tell you as somebody who worked on a referendum, a $7 million referendum for the Bruce, it is a lot of work. We had 12 weeks to do it. And I had many sleepless nights. So the more time that is allocated to being able to do this, the better. So I'll just say that.
I have no objections to this ordinance.
Anybody have any other final questions, thoughts? One last thing I will say, the next budget meeting will be held on July 22nd. With that meeting, we will be going through essentially it'll be the expenses as proposed by each of the departments. So we will have an opportunity to go through the expenses. As far as the appropriation ordinance, we are legally required to do it. I did check with the attorneys today, and says we shall pass the appropriation ordinance. But just so everybody is aware, the appropriation ordinance is a little different than the budget. So there's a budget document that we staff works from, and then there's the appropriations. The appropriations are what we have to file with the county, and it sets the base for our tax levy, which we will pass later on in the year. If we delay the appropriation ordinance, there is the possibility that somebody could come back and say that we did not follow the state statute, and then it could affect our tax levy adoption as well, which would then limit the funding that is released from the county to us. So just want to make sure everybody has that information out there. Again, I know that everybody here has a copy of the general fund budget, which is really where the deficit lies. All the expenses that are being proposed by staff are listed in there. We have 2 weeks until our next budget meeting. I encourage you, if you have a question, please get them to me so that I can work with staff to get some answers prior to the July 22nd meeting. And then the special funds will be forthcoming to you once we have those.
All right, commissioners, thank you for your participation in this afternoon. To the business owners, to the chamber, thank you for coming to hear the challenges facing the village. Like I said, we want to work with you all to come up with solutions that have buy-in. Because solutions that have buy-in are often the solutions that are best received. Having said that, we will adjourn today's revenue discussion. Thank you.